What is a survival computer? Why do you need a survival computer? Which computers are good survival computers? And how do you build and configure these computers? Well, a survival computer is your main go-to computer during an emergency, whether it be your main computer's crashed, or you're bugging in and its grid's down, or you've decided to bug out. It's the computer you're going to pack with you in your bag. And why do you need one of these? Why do you need a computer when everything's gone downhill? Well, what about all that seed data? Hopefully here you saved some data on seeds, downloaded a bunch of other information that you can use in your survival environment, maybe a foraging guide, whatever else. Do you really need to pack 20 books in your bag if you can get them all on PDFs and put them on a digital information system? And how are you going to access that digital information system? That's your survival computer's job. It can run programs and manage systems, so it can read those files. It can read files of your old address books, your lists, things like that. It can read all that data, access that, run those programs to be able to do things for you, run timers, and access things like you can access all kinds of other systems, like maybe sensors and things to be able to tell you about your environment. They're also useful in communications. You can run software-defined radio on them if it's grid down. If it's grid up, they've got cellular and all that. All kinds of communications capabilities to decipher existing communications, encode communications, know communications addresses, have those radio frequencies, all that data of those radio frequencies of people that you knew, your old ham radio contacts, your old GMRS radio contacts. These communications can be helped out by your survival computer, and they can also be used to access and configure equipment, such as your digital camera. It can pull images off of that, deal with data between other systems, such as maybe your phone, if it's still there with you, access, maybe you have a digital gun scope, your old Baofeng ham radios, or any other type of ham radio, or any other type of radio that can be configured through a computer. You might have an additional configuration you might want to put on there now that it's a grid down. It would be good to be able to have that configuration, be able to plug it in and reprogram it through this computing system. So let's take a look now at what type of systems work as good survival computers and why. I'm comparing 4 different platforms. Yeah, I'm not just going to make it that easy to just straight say, yes, it is, use this, use that. I use multiple. I'm a big techie person, though, at the same time. But I do recommend at least picking one based on whatever your needs are. So here I have in the purple, that's Raspberry Pis, and these are scored on a scale of 0 through 10. Actually, kind of 1 through 10, I think. I don't think anything's down there as a 0 on this. Everything's scored, so even if it shows it's really high, like on power usage, it's a good score is what that means. It means it's doing very well. It's not consuming very much when I show, say that green bar that's all the way up. So purple shows the Raspberry Pi and its performance on these characteristics. Green shows our smartphones, and a smartphone, I do have to say, it's got an extra plus being a survival computer because it's probably a part of your everyday carry. You're probably looking at it a number of hours out of the day. So, it's probably going to be with you when you need it. All right. Blue is your tablets, and you might have that with you all the time too. And orange is a laptop. But then again, you might want a dedicated one of these. Um, you might not use your smartphone that you generally use on a daily basis because of the configuration you're going to want, which we'll talk about that in a little bit, the configuration. But you'll figure out what you need. First of all, though, we're just going to take a look and see how these devices compare as survival computers, and then we'll look at configuration, and then you can decide, do you want to use your everyday carry cell phone, or do you want to use a different one, or whatever your other devices that you choose to use. So ease of power. The smartphone and the tablet are the top two for that, because they are powered by USB, and they also, so they run on the standard 5 volts. You'll almost always be able to access that. And they also have an internal battery, so they can be powered without external power. Now the Raspberry Pi is powered by that easy to come by power source of that 5 volt USB power. But it doesn't have an internal battery, and that's why I docked it a little bit on its score. To ease the power, you really have to hook up an external power source to it, which can be a USB power bank that you assign to it. But it's, that's adding to the size and the weight factor to it. As it is, it needs to have a power source plugged right into it. And then the laptop is the worst, because they're generally running on 110 volts unless you find one of those very rare 12 volt car chargers. Then you really have to get 12 volt power and invert that, because chances are, if all you have is USB power bank, you're not going to be powering your laptop. But it does have an internal battery, so that will help you a little bit for a brief period of time, for while that battery lasts. Depends on your computer as far as how long it's going to last. They may last anywhere from less than an hour all the way on up to 10, 12 hours. Just depends on the laptop. Usually the smaller the screen size, the less power they consume. But that's where we're going to get into the next item here, power usage. So the best one as far as power usage, and why this is important too. Ease of power is, how easy is it going to be to power? And I think that's self-explanatory. But the power usage is important too, because we're not talking about grid up where you can just plug it right into your outlet. We're talking about you're out camping, you're out whatever your situation is, where you don't have that easy access to just plug in your stuff to the outlet overnight and pay 20 extra cents on your electric bill the next day at the end of the month, whatever it be. You don't have that option with this. You're going to have to generate that power. That's my main point behind this. So power usage, the better it's going to do on power usage, the more energy efficient it is. That's what this is a scale of, is its energy efficiency, not how much it uses. And so the more energy efficient that it is, the less power that it uses, the longer it will last on the power that you can store, and the less you're going to have to work to recharge that power. The less time you're going to have to sit with a solar panel or run a hand crank generator or whatever you end up needing, or having to run your power generator, maybe your regular gas generator. The less gas you're going to have to consume charging that device. So we want good on power consumption, and the best one is the smartphone that I've been able to find. But the Raspberry Pi is right up in there. It's really good on power consumption for what it does. And the tablet, it's about half of that. Just depends on the tablet though. Some tablets are absolutely huge and have huge screens and have a lot of capability, and some of them not so much. And this is just kind of an average tablet, an average phone, good Raspberry Pi, one of the 3 or 4 series, 3B plus, 4, somewhere around that range. And you can also get even better Raspberry Pis that use even less power, but then they don't have the same performance. So there are differences in Raspberry Pis, and at some other point I'm sure I'm going to break down some of these other platforms a little bit deeper. But this is in general what they are. So in general, tablets generally use about twice as much power as your phone does. And a laptop is going to use a lot more power. It is very inefficient on the laptop side. Now, as far as size and weight's concerned, the cell phone, the smartphone, it's going to be, it's that tiny little thing you hold in your hand, and everything's right there. So yes, it scores the highest for the size and weight. It's lightweight, very compact, excellent. And the next item on the list, only by a little difference between the Raspberry Pi and the tablet does a little bit better because it is more compact all in one, while the Raspberry Pi will probably weigh a little bit less, but it's going to be a little bit more bulky because you're going to have some extra peripherals that you're going to have with it, because it's not built all in one. Now you could build a case that puts it all together in one, but that's a little bit more involved. It's not native to the Raspberry Pi platform. So packing a Raspberry Pi is going to be a little bit more difficult than packing a tablet. But probably one of the hardest ones as far as weight and all that is a laptop. Laptops are usually pretty heavy, pretty bulky. So I gave the laptop the lowest score on the size and weight. Now, as far as data storage, now this deals with the internal drive. This is important because if you can store your information in your digital information system on the main drive, that's awesome. That's one less thing to get lost. It's one more thing that, as long as you have that survival computer, you have all of that data. You have your seed planting data. You have your manuals. You have your contact list. You have all your ham radio frequencies. You have whatever else you packed. It's all there if it's on the main drive. And so laptops generally they can be around a terabyte. Pretty commonly can be up to about a terabyte. While a lot of times your phones are, we're dealing with like 128 gigs or so. And the Raspberry Pi won't go over 32 gigs on its boot drive. So the Raspberry Pi is the worst one as far as data storage on its main drive, as far as being able to put it all in the same compact box. But the laptop has the highest one out of these, and these are the portable computer systems. I did not put Arduino on there because I don't think it's really a good survival computer. It doesn't seem to have the capability for what we're looking for, to be able to access these files and read them to us and whatnot. And a regular PC or a server box or anything like that, that's just too bulky. We're talking about being able to carry this with us on a bug out. But as far as those that are capable for that, your laptop is the best for data storage in it. And then your other smartphone and tablet, they're in the middle. But definitely the Raspberry Pi is also tanked at the bottom. And different tablets and smartphones are going to be different on that. Some of them are going to be more, some of them are going to be less, but usually they will be between the Raspberry Pi and the laptop. The laptop will almost always beat almost anything else. Now, data interface. This deals with the ability to connect additional data systems to it, additional data storage to the device externally, such as carrying an external drive. There you can make up for all of the deficiencies on the internal storage plus some. And the best ones for that is the Raspberry Pi, because it's got all kinds of access to, it has the USB, some of them even have additional smart digital or other types of slots in them. And you can even hook up your own custom system to the GPIO and connect it to stuff that's not even designed for that platform initially, that it has to be read in through a very custom interface. So it beats a laptop on interfaces. Laptops, oftentimes they do have smart digital ports and all that, and USB drives and all those extensible capabilities, while the tablet and the smartphone falls to the bottom of this again. Well, it's not the bottom of it, but they were only in the middle on the internal data storage, and they're on the bottom for extending it. So it's very difficult. They oftentimes have a external smart digital plug-in, and you might be able to hook it up through the one USB port that they have. It may or may not work very well for you. The data interfacing is very difficult on those devices. So as far as storage is concerned, smartphones and tablets, they're in the middle range, I would say, middle to lower, while Raspberry Pi, it depends on how you've configured it. If you have external storage, you could have terabytes, I mean, you won't. If you have the laptop, you're going to have the terabyte drive, and then you can have additional terabytes as well. So you can have a lot of data storage on those. Now, if you do hook up external data, that's going to be another whole power consumption issue. That's a whole other peripheral that's going to be running with its own power consumption. Now, performance. This deals with what types of programs they can run, how well they can keep their programs going, multitasking, different types of programs they can run, what can they do as far as, video formats and stuff like that. What are their performance like? How much RAM, how much memory, how much speed do they have? So a laptop is going to be the best. Your laptop, if you get a good laptop, it should outperform any of the other devices. The other ones are pretty close to each other, but I did give, and it just depends on the tablet that you get. Some tablets are real bottom of the barrel, and some of them are high-end gaming tablets. And some smartphones are real high-end smartphones, and some of them are real disposable, close to junk. And then you've got Raspberry Pis that are also different too. You've got different scales on those. But your Raspberry Pi, I would say, beats your smartphone and your tablet by a thin margin, and that's because of its ability to multitask and keep programs running, while a lot of times smartphones and tablets, they don't keep things running as well. They'll sometimes garbage collect early on applications. They won't necessarily multitask in the same way, but the laptop is by far the best on performance. And there are certain types of videos that a Raspberry Pi won't read, and I've also noticed that too with tablets and smartphones. Sometimes certain videos or certain file formats, doesn't matter which package you put into it, it just won't read it. While a laptop, you can almost always get the software to get it to read. Now, as far as built-in devices, Raspberry Pi, yes, its power consumption is based on the module itself. Other modules need to be added. They don't come with built-in keyboards, with built-in mice, with built-in video. You've got to hook up all of that. It's all external items. Now you can build a box that has all that connected into it. and have one big brick where it's all ready to go. But the Raspberry really does hurt on having all of its devices built right in. The smartphone is probably the best. It has, I give it its highest marks that I give anything on this area, because it has built in, it's designed as a phone, so it's going to have all the full duplex audio with the speaker and the microphone. Tablets, I docked them a little bit on that because they don't always have the microphone. They usually have a speaker. Just depends on the tablet. But some of them are missing some of these things. It just depends on the tablet. Some of them are missing the ability to talk over the cellular network. But usually on these devices, on the smartphone and the tablet, they scored really high because they do have built-in network. They have built-in GPS normally. Built-in screen, touch screen with a touch keyboard, software right on there. Everything's built into this one little flat, compact box that you need to run it. It has a lot of stuff built in there. So yes, they got the high built-in devices. The laptop doesn't have GPS. It doesn't have the orientation sensors. It does not have the cellular built right into it normally. So, but it still has a keyboard and a mouse, and oftentimes a microphone and a speaker. So I gave it the middle on that. So you just really got to look across these different characteristics of what you need in your survival computer and figure out what matches it best. As far as extensibility, that can help even the playing field on these things a little bit too. The Raspberry Pi is the most extensible platform by far that there is, I feel, on any of these things. They got the GPIO, they have the ability to just be inserted into something else. They're a very good module. But the laptop has more ports for extension, and therefore it's the middle of them. And the tablet and the smartphone, sure, they've got their Bluetooth and those capabilities to extend them, but they're really kind of limited as far as extending those, I feel. So on these things, you're just going to have to figure out what you need out of your survival computer, and therefore which system or combination of systems you want in your bug out bag, or in your bug in kit, or whatever you might need. These are things here that you might consider what you want to load into what you want to use, what you want to build and configure as your survival computer based on these characteristics. Are you wanting to run a bunch of external wiring for security systems? A Raspberry Pi is the one to go for with that. Do you need a whole bunch of video library stuff? Terabytes of videos to be able to watch. Is most of your stuff going to be on video? You have no problem with providing power to things. Well, then your laptop is probably the way to go. You want something that's always with you, probably your smartphone or your tablet. They're pretty middle of the road. They don't have a lot of the extensibility for running the other alarm systems and stuff of that nature, but they are they're easier to configure, I think, in a lot of ways, but they also don't get as much out of them. But they're also some of the most easy to power devices that we have. Is the smartphone is probably the best for power when you're looking for getting it its energy. The smartphone's the best when it comes to extensibility. The hardware side of things, the Raspberry. Performance, the laptop beats all of those. The tablet, if you want a little bit more than you did out of the smartphone, I think the tablet's the one to go for if you need a little bit more performance. Is get a good tablet, but they're going to be that performance, you're going to have to power it. Alright, so let's take a look now at configuring your survival computer. Once you've chosen what you're going to run, then you need to, if there's any hardware to be assembled, you'll need to assemble that hardware. That would mean, getting your different pieces of your Raspberry, get the frame that it's going to go inside of, get the heat sinks, get them in place, screw that box together. Your laptop, find which laptop you're going to have, make sure it has the right hard drive, the right memory, the right whatever you can do to customize that hardware. You want to assemble that up front. And then I like to install the operating system and the software. Whatever operating system you think is good for you to take with you for a survival computer. I like Linux because it's very easy to self-contain it. A good self-contained version such as Debian is my go-to, or Raspberry if it's for a Raspberry Pi. That's where I think your smart devices like your tablets and your smartphones, that I think that they really don't go well on that self-containing portion. They are too grid dependent. But you do want to make sure that you get the right operating system installed, the right components to that operating system. If you need certain servers on there for your intended use, make sure that's on there, your software, anything you need to access that data that you're going to be putting on here. If you're going to be putting on PDFs, make sure you have PDF readers. If you're going to be putting on video files, make sure you have the appropriate video players to play the formats of videos that you're going in there. Test it. Make sure that you have the right software for your needs. Open up some of those files on that computer and put a copy of your critical data, that's that digital information system, on the device. Make sure it's not on the cloud. You want to make sure that you can, if you're on a smart device such as a smartphone or tablet, go into like airplane mode, turn off the connection, and see if you can open up your stuff and read it. Reboot and reopen it. If you are on a laptop or a Raspberry Pi, just make sure you've completely disconnected from the internet. Reboot and reload it. Make sure it will run and it's not just cached in memory somewhere. Reboot and reload it. Make sure it's actually on the device, not on the cloud somewhere, that you don't just have your address book there that's, it needs the cloud. As soon as you lose the internet connection, you don't have your address book. What good is that? This should be self-contained. Then go through your settings. There's a lot of things you're going to want to do. You're going to want to turn off all your radios to start. At least that's what I do. I like to turn off all my radios. That means my Bluetooth, my cellular data, my Wi-Fi, any of that stuff here. I'm going to turn that off before I store this device, because I want to know that when I boot this thing up during an emergency, I don't have radios giving away my location or consuming my power. And the same thing with brightnesses of my screens and the colors I'm going to choose. I'm going to go through there and I'm going to change my colors, my color schemes wherever I can, and I'm going to try to make it to where it's as dim as possible. And I'm probably going to turn that brightness most of the way down to where I can still see it, but barely. So your brightness consumes probably the most power out of anything on most devices, especially ones with a decent sized screen. Dimming that dramatically saves your power. And as it's booting up, as soon as it takes that power setting, it's really saving power. It's also detectability. So it's both. It's about saving your power and your detectability. Go through your settings, and it also is about your speed. I want to have everything set up to where everything is easy. It's at my fingertips as I start it up. I can very quickly, oftentimes with a few hotkeys or with a quick and easy icon. Everything is streamlined, so whatever I need to access, I shouldn't have to take too much time with that computer running to be able to access that, because time is power consumed. I want to be able to access this stuff very quickly, not use a lot of power, and not expose myself for too long as well. If I'm worried about the exposure issues with the light being seen, I want to make sure that my systems are very low powered. So I'm going to go through all of those settings, set up everything to where it's easy to get access to. It's not going to take too much time to do it. Test it using drills. Make sure that it is easy to access. Make sure that you have all the software to access your data. Your hardware is working correctly. Your data is present. So it just depends on which device you chose. At some point here I do intend to go through and create some other videos on some of the other platforms at least, and really show how to get that up and running. But for right now, this is a general overview for the different platforms that you could use, their functionality, and the basic procedure on how you would set up any of those platforms. Thank you for watching.